You're listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of The Whole Truth podcast. I'm Paul Armstrong. I've just had a great chat with James Durrant. He's the Chief Executive of RareX. RareX has a market cap of $13 million. The company has just pegged some very promising land 300 kilometres east of Kalgoorlie, which it already knows hosts a mineral called niobium. Now, niobium has risen to fame in the recent months because it is the mineral behind the runaway success story WA1 Resources. WA1 now has a market cap of $1.3 billion thanks to its niobium discovery in the north of Western Australia. Its share price is at $20.50. It was 14 cents in late 2022. That in itself highlights the enormous upside here for RareX at its new project in Western Australia. James says they know niobium is already in this ground. The question is how much and at what grade, and nobody's going to die wondering here. The company is already planning its first geological sampling programs, and James has just committed on this episode of the podcast to be drilling at this project in October. Given the upside that WA1 Resources shareholders have enjoyed over the past 12 to 18 months, it's easy to see how RareX could change people's lives on the back of the drill bit with a niobium discovery not far from Kalgoorlie. James takes us through what niobium's used for, why he knows there's niobium in RareX's ground, and what they plan to do to unlock the potentially enormous value of this new lump of land. James, you've just announced this week that RareX has acquired a new project. You've gone into the niobium business, I see, and the project has this rather curious name of Kalgoorlie. One could be forgiven at first glance for thinking you've just dived into deepest, darkest Africa.
Not at all, actually. This project is not in Africa. It's less than 300 kilometres outside of Kalgoorlie. And I would actually say that we're not diving into a new business. This is really a very natural segue from the work we've been doing at Cummins Range. You see, Cummins Range is a carbonatite with rare earths and phosphates. It's moved on to the engineering phase, and our geologists have now moved on to business development work. And through that, we've found this tremendous project, which we've called the Kalgoorlie project, which is a large-scale niobium project outside of Kalgoorlie.
Right, let me stop you there. People listening to this would say, niobium, sounds pretty fancy. What is niobium? What's it used for?
Well, actually, niobium and rare earths are often considered in the same suite of metals. They're very speciality metals, they're critical metals. Niobium's main volumetric use is in the steel industry, in making very hard superalloyed steels. But it's got this very strong emerging demand in improving battery life and in superconductors and semiconductors. So it fits in with the electronics thematic, and RareX was built around the electronics revolution.
Now, it would be remiss of us if we didn't look at one of the great success stories of the share market of the past year or so in the niobium space. It will give people a bit of a flavour of just how right this can go if the planets line up for you here at Kalgoorlie. A company called WA1 Resources, WA1 as it's commonly referred to, now has a market cap of $1.3 billion. Its share price has come from around 14 cents in late 2022 to a whopping $20.50 today as we talk. It's been one of the most spectacular stories in the share market of recent times, and it's all on the back of its niobium project in the north of Western Australia, somewhere around near the border of the Northern Territory. One might somewhat ungenerously refer to it as being an absolute middle of nowhere, but that hasn't deterred investors. As I say, they've taken it from absolutely virtually close to worthless to $1.3 billion. Clearly, the market recognises that there is a big future for niobium.
I think they absolutely do. We went out not specifically looking for niobium because that wasn't necessarily our speciality, although we do have niobium at Cummins Range. We went out looking for where's the best fertile ground for carbonatites. These are those intrusive things that come up with metals in them when they're mineralized.
Now, let me stop you there. As the ABC journalists are so fond of saying every 20 seconds, let me stop you there. When you talk about a carbonatite coming up, you're talking about a structure that's come up from the earth through the earth's crust. It's almost like a cone bursting through the earth. You
could imagine it as if it were the core of an old volcano, that it's come up as a liquid magma core. It's formed a volcano, it's still solidified, and then over millions of years, it's eroded away, and the core is what's left. And often the metals that come up with it, depending where in the height of that column, they will settle out or fractionate out in different quantities. Now, to find carbonatites, you want a very active geological zone. And what we've done is actually found on this project we've just acquired, we've made a discovery already on the desktop. This is a massive alkaline intrusive complex. That's where you've got complicated geology from alkalinic rocks that have come up from the center. That is where carbonatites form. And that is also where you get the niobium from, which became the real upside to this project for us. The alkaline intrusive complex, they typically bring much higher amounts of niobium with them than your typical background levels. And then you look for signals that there is concentration happening within the complex. And through our data analysis, we found that there is concentration of niobium up to over 1,000 parts per million. That's 0.1%. That's a quarter of the way up to production grade niobium.
How do you know it's niobium rich?
The great thing with this project is the amount of data that comes with it. We've had 3 major companies go over this ground, all with disparate components of the package that we've now put together. They've done tier 1 company type exploration programs, expensive programs, looking for very specific criteria, but not having the requirements for their geologists to dive into things that they're not primarily looking for. And they were looking for large-scale gold deposits like the Tropicana project and large-scale nickel deposits. But as they moved through and collected all this incredibly expensive data, they left a treasure trove of data that our geologists are now interpreting. We got up to a point of comfort with that data to say, this is a niobium-rich alkaline intrusive complex. That's the breeding ground for carbonatites. There's signatures there of enrichment of niobium, and therefore this is a place we should be packaging up.
So the key line of that, James, is that you've inherited all this data, which begs the obvious question. If there's so much data, there's so much smoke, there's so much evidence that this is niobium rich, to use your phrase, why hasn't somebody already pegged it and owned it?
I think it comes back to a few favourable things that have happened in its past. It's been owned bits and pieces by other companies, but never holistically. And so when you put it together, you can really see what you have, but you can't see what you have if you only have a quarter of it or a third of it, which is how those tenements have been broken down in the past. And also, no one's been looking particularly for this. They've been moving through the region looking for those nickel deposits or the large-scale gold deposits, and have moved on and never spent the time. We've spent 6 weeks digesting this data, and we've probably got another 3 to 4 weeks of real good quality data crunching to go. That's actually what's going to be happening for the rest of this financial year.
And given that it's 300 kilometres sort of east of Kalgoorlie, there's no surprise that people have been looking for nickel and gold, given that's what the area is well known for, so richly endowed with. But you've managed here to collect and aggregate half a dozen tenements or so by pegging them. Is that how you've arrived at this?
Look, it was a combination. We found a vendor for one of the particular tenement packages. We linked that with another vendor for the fourth, and we staked our claim to another 2 to make sure we had the right district scale package, nearly 1,000 square kilometres. And by putting those together, that's when you can step back and start looking at the geochemistry, the geophysics, and that's when we made the discovery of this 20-kilometre diameter alkaline intrusive complex.
Right, so you've aggregated the land, you've got a big footprint, you know there's niobium there, as you say, big strike length now to explore. The question becomes, what are you going to do about it?
Well, we are going to go in there with drills as soon as possible. But what we're going to do in the meantime is make sure we know exactly where to put those drills. We want to do a 10,000 metre drill program in about 5 months' time. And then the lead up to that, we are going to be doing the desktop work, the geophysics, the detailed geophysics in areas where there's data gaps. We're going to be making sure our camp's ready and our access is there. And then we're moving in for a very large scale program. We were very lucky that we didn't pay very much money for these tenements, and we've put them together very cheaply, less than $300,000 equivalent. So we've managed to do that with our own working capital. And then we're funding the exploration through a raise that we've just completed.
So here's a rather non-geological sort of question. Are you going to come along and just put some holes straight into the guts of it?
This is the thing. I think it's a large area. and there are carbonatites out there. Now, we want to be drilling the carbonatite. We don't want to be faffing around missing them. So it's worth investing in the upfront effort, the work in the field, the geological mapping, the gravity and the magnetics, and closing any of those gaps in the geophysics, so that when we put those drills in, none of those meters are wasted.
So the name of the game is to try to increase your chances of success with the drill bit, given the cost and the time associated with drilling. Try to sort of home in on the more promising areas, and then put some holes straight into it.
Yeah, look, and carbonatites have very specific signatures geochemically and geophysically, and we're finding those now. So I think in the near future, you'll start to see some further interpretation of the results to real home in on where these drill targets are going.
Now, let's just focus on that phrase, the near future. Investors will say, I want to know when these guys are going to put a hole into this. What's the answer?
October is when we start drilling. We'll start a 2-drill 10,000 metre program in October.
That's fantastic. You won't find many chief executives who actually give you a month for the start of drilling, particularly when there's that much work to be done in the meantime. So there's the carrot, a lead up to October, and drill holes with a view to trying to repeat the success that WA1 has enjoyed with its Niobium project. Now, that demonstrates the upside here. Now, that's not the only ticket on the raffle, though, is it? Because RareX, as the name suggests, has been plugging away at rare earths for some time. We know that rare earths were very much the flavour of the month going back some time. You'd have to be fair and say they're probably not as hot to trot as they were in investors' minds a year or so ago. But nonetheless, these things come and go. And the Cummins Range project that RareX has been working on has sort of reached a point now where some hard work is being done behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. RareX was formed on the electronics revolution. It picked up the Cummins Range project very early, 2019 or so, and we've defined the deposit on that. It's rare earths and phosphate, it's rare earths in monazite, it's phosphate and apatite. It's exactly what you're looking for. We moved that into the study phase, and we're working on offtake right now. So the real value driver for that project is validating it through offtake. So that's the absolute narrow focus on Cummins Range. And it is very leveraged, that project, towards the rare earth price. And the reason that the junior rare earth companies have deteriorated in value over the last 12 months is because the rare earth metal prices have depreciated in value. And that's been geopolitics playing around with supply and demand. Now that we're starting to see turn, we're starting to see the pickup of rare earth prices. The demand is still incredibly strong fundamentally. So we anticipate incentivization pricing, which is double what it is now, to return within the next 12 months. We're leveraged towards that as a company. The project's leveraged towards that at Cummins Range. And now we have the Niobium flagship exploration project to go alongside Cummins Range.
So you've got two projects to drive value. Now, we have made quite a bit of the fact that WA1 is now worth $1.3 billion. Now, it does have more in common with RareX than just Niobium exploration, because RareX has a market cap of $13 million. One could say, what's a decimal place between friends? But as uncanny coincidence, isn't it? $13 million, $1.3 billion. That decimal point in itself highlights the leverage and the upside for RareX shareholders.
Well, perhaps when people ask me what is my purpose in running this business, well, maybe my purpose is to move one step along the decimal point curve.
And with that movement, you would argue lives can be changed on the back of a drill bit.
Look, indeed. And I think we know about Cummins Range now. What we don't know is how well mineralized the internal parts of this new project, the Kalgoorlie project, are. So once that drill bit goes in there, there's the potential for some serious upside. If there's any place you want to be to find mineralized carbonatites, it's in that alkaline intrusive complex.
And if there's any place you want to make a discovery, it's 300 kilometres east of Kalgoorlie.
20 kilometres from an airfield, 50 kilometres from a road and a gas pipeline. It's well connected.
Hey, James, thanks very much for your frankness today. This is obviously a project that's got the potential, as we said, to change lives. It's classic exploration. I think WA1 has given us some brilliant insights into what a niobium discovery can do. Hats off to them for their success. And may we, the gods smile on RareX in the same way as they have on WA1, and the drill bit returns big, fat, juicy intersections of niobium, and we're off to the races, as they say. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Paul.
You've been listening to The Whole Truth, a Resources Rising Stars podcast, produced by Resource Media, hosted by Paul Armstrong for Reed Corporate. Please note that Reed Corporate does not provide investment advice, and investors should seek personalised advice before making any investment decisions.